Hello, genealogists. My name is Karen. I'm a molecular biologist by trade, and I will be leading the Puget Sound Genealogical Society class entitled Who's in Your DNA? This is a primer to our discussion for that class. I'll tell you about relevant properties of DNA and which DNA gets tested for information on genealogy. The reason we are interested in DNA is because it's passed on from one generation to the next, linking us to our predecessors and to our descendants. DNA is like a software that lays out our body plan and function. This software is coded by 4 chemicals known collectively as nucleotides. The nucleotides that form our DNA come in 4 types, whose chemical names are abbreviated A, C, T, and G. Nucleotides are linked together to form long strands of DNA that can be read as a sequence and which forms an individual's genetic signature. As the name nucleotide suggests, most of the DNA in our cells is stored in the nucleus. But we also have some DNA in the energy-producing mitochondria of our cells. The evolutionary history of how mitochondria showed up inside our cells and brought their own DNA with them is a really fascinating story. If you are curious about this, WNYC's Radiolab podcast tells this story really well in an episode called Cellmates. The DNA in the nucleus is bundled into 23 pairs of chromosomes. In 22 of these, each chromosome in a pair looks very similar to one another. These are called autosomes, and we'll come back to those. The 23rd pair of chromosomes looks a bit different and contains information that determines an individual's sex. So the chromosomes in this last pair are called sex chromosomes. In women, this pair is made up of 2 X chromosomes. One is passed from a mother and the other from a father. In men, the pair is made up of 1 X chromosome inherited from a mother and a Y chromosome inherited from a father. Only men have Y chromosomes to pass on to their children, and so the Y chromosome is used to follow the paternal lineage. To follow the maternal lineage, we have to travel outside the nucleus and look back at mitochondrial DNA. Mitochondrial DNA is passed on through the maternal line only. Even though sperm does contain mitochondria, the egg targets sperm mitochondria for destruction immediately after fertilization. So the only mitochondrial DNA that survives to be passed on to both male and female children comes from a mother. Finally, the autosomal DNA is a mixture of DNA passed on from both mother and father. Each chromosome in a pair comes from a different parent. In other words, a child has 50% of her DNA from mom and 50% from dad. And when it comes time to pass those chromosomes on to the 3rd generation, chromosomes mingle and mix together in a process called recombination. The result of this is that a grandchild gets about 25% of their genome from each grandparent. This is why autosomal DNA can tell us about both sides of the family. The key to discovering who's in your DNA comes not from reading your genetic signature in isolation, but from comparing your genetic signature to those of your relations. Our DNA, as a species, is mostly the same, but in a string of 3 billion A's, C's, T's, and G's, every once in a while, there's a difference. That needle in a haystack, a marker that makes us stand out from the crowd. These markers are a family trait that help us distinguish individuals who are related from those who are not. On April 23rd, we'll look at what these markers are and how we can analyze them to help fill out our ancestral narrative.